Hi, I'm Sean.
I'm Rhonda.
We're excited to be with you today to talk about working through issues with your spouse and some things that we need to take into consideration before we get started.
So some of our own vulnerabilities that might be in the picture as we are talking to our spouse about these difficult topics to talk through. Maybe I'm being indirect. Maybe I'm beating around the bush and my spouse isn't even clear of what I'm asking.
You know, that's something that I've definitely had to work on, and we can't assume that our spouse knows our thoughts and feelings if we don't open up our mouth and let them know.
And we have to be clear. We can't hint or insinuate, but we can still be polite while we're being clear. Hey, would you please do this for me? And we're wanting to ask, not place demands.
Yeah.
Yes, our spouse, 1 Corinthians 7, should want to please us, but that's something that's given, not taken.
You know, sometimes that can be rooted in a fear of confrontation and not really wanting to be confrontational with someone or with our spouse.
Yeah, and so, you know, it may be that your spouse is indirect with you. If your spouse is indirect, it may be that someone from the past, or you yourself, or you're resembling someone from the past, has set your spouse up to expect certain things, and they're concerned to come right out and ask. So we want to prove ourselves trustworthy when it comes to our spouse, so our spouse can easily approach us for the things that they need. So it kind of goes both ways. And as we talk through these, you might look at, am I being indirect? Is my spouse being indirect?
You know, on the flip side, you've got somebody maybe that has a tendency to be more argumentative. So there's a lot of things, obviously, that would need to be considered there. Are we having a calm and clear way of presenting what the need is, or are we just kind of dumping or blowing up on our spouse and expecting that they're going to be able to sift through all that and understand what our request really is?
Because if we escalate quickly, if we become argumentative, if my spouse has anything to say and I just squash it as if it's nothing in this picture, only I'm in this picture, you know, we're difficult to talk to when we're like that. Who wants to talk to somebody that's going to fight us tooth and nail for whatever it is we need to talk about? If we can calm down and take it really slow, think business meeting. Lower your tone of voice, talk softer, like it says, soft answer turns away wrath. Use fewer words and talk a little more slowly, and you're more likely to engage your spouse.
You know, another thing we need to consider is, am I lightening up too much? Am I not really letting my spouse know the impact that this behavior is having on our relationship?
Wow, that could mean you say something to your spouse and they just kind of ignore it. Maybe they don't understand. They're unaware about what this even means because it's not something that bothers them. You might need to share with your spouse your vulnerable side. You know, when this happens, it makes me feel, and then you want to use an adjective. It might be something like, it makes me feel invisible, like I'm a nothing, a nobody. Or it makes me start getting really angry because you might as well be calling me names when you say that. Or you could say something like, you know, when this happens, it basically redefines our relationship as much more distant. Or you might share with your spouse what would happen if there was a change in this area, and use a couple of adjectives. Don't go on and on. Don't drag your spouse through the emotional mud. But you might say something like, you know, if you were to do this for me, it would really make me feel like I was a valuable partner in this relationship, or something to that effect.
You know, I was just thinking when you were saying that, sometimes, you know, we can use a scale of 1 to 10 and kind of let our spouse know, you know, on this scale of 1 to 10, this is where this behavior falls. You know, it's a 9, or you know, it's really just a 2 or 3 or something. So that way it helps them to understand what it really means, what its value is in our economy.
Right. Being too anxious. If I'm very anxious, I can show a lot of intensity, and it's something that whoever's more verbal may tend to do much more easily than the one who's less verbal. The one who's less verbal gets this way when they get stirred up, but being too emotional and intense can definitely make us hard to hear, because we sound probably like we're pushy. I've got to have this, you've got to do this for me, and like we're trying to make them our puppet.
Sometimes we can say something like, hey, could you turn the volume down on that? Or could you turn down the intensity a little bit to help me to be able to hear the message through all of the emotional intensity that's wrapped around it?
What if we are breaking down and becoming overwhelmed? What if I begin to cry too easily? Or what if I begin to escalate, or I can't talk about this, then we can't really work through anything. That's why it's important for both parties to be aware of triggers and to know this is what I need to have an ongoing discussion so that I don't exit for one reason or another.
Yeah. Another thing that you may be doing is giving in more than you really wanted to. And, you need to let your spouse know this is really what I want versus I'm just settling for something, but I'm not letting my spouse know this is what's really going on inside of me.
Right. And it may be that that's all your spouse chooses to do for you. And in that case, we have to choose to be okay with it. I'm being blessed in this way, and to take whatever we still need to the Lord and allow the Lord to show our spouse. And so, while it's important to realize I might have stopped short, I might not have been getting everything I wanted, there's a balance there so we don't come across as demanding.
Yeah. We could be getting sidetracked some of the time. Sometimes we might bring up some issue and then we get off on what we call rabbit trails, and we go down talking about other things that are not really at the heart of the issue that we want our spouse to understand.
Because let's face it, when we're talking about a given issue or a given challenge, they tend to be kind of interrelated.
Yeah.
So one thing may bring up multiple issues that are not yet resolved, and I could end up wandering down in one of those directions, but guess what? That's going to confuse the current thing. The more facets we bring to the table of one issue, or the more issues we bring to the table, the less likely we are to be able to work through it.
We're really complicated, and if we can keep things extremely simple, extremely narrowed down, and very basic, we're more likely to be able to solve it, even if you have to have multiple times of talking about something to cover all the different aspects of what you're experiencing. It's better to keep each thing separate.
Right. So talking about it in little pieces and taking longer to do that is a lot better than not getting to talk about it at all.
Yeah. Sometimes we can just simply be fearing the consequences of the confrontation. Things like rejection and disapproval can push us away from really facing and dealing with these things.
Or the conflict itself that's going to happen if we handle it badly. And so, if that's the case for you or your spouse, there would need to be boundaries. If I bring up something and it's going to absolutely explode into something horrendous, then I would want to be able to present clearly and politely and well in maybe 1 to 3 sentences, be prepared to back off. And if the spouse begins exploding because there's not self-control there, have boundaries ready. We've got a video on discussing boundaries, but be prepared to say, you know what, I'm not going to get into a discussion. I just wanted to let you know. And if you at some point want to be able to discuss without all of this intensity, I would be willing to talk to you about that, but not in this way.
We need to have an awareness of both ourselves and our spouse, of each other's vulnerabilities and what each other is dealing with. Behind the scenes, when we want to deal with an issue, we need to understand maybe we need to tiptoe in this certain area. We need to watch how I present something that touches on that what can be like a landmine. It's something you don't see that's there, and then you get this explosion and wonder, what did I say?
And so we may need to be taking those to the Lord. Sometimes we have a spouse that we can talk to about that. But if there's enough negativity in the relationship, we may not be able to discuss those things. And we want to go through some healing. What is the emotion that I'm feeling right now? And what is the thought behind that emotion? And how does the Lord want me to face this so that I can respond later instead of react?